As all broadcast journalists know, the most important stories are not made, they're found. Finding them sometimes takes the form of stumbling onto them. And this is what happened when the KOMO Television Special Projects Unit went to the small Columbia River town of North Bonneville, Washington. The town was about to be displaced by the building of a new powerhouse, and the residents were locked in a struggle with the Army Corps of Engineers. KOMO TV went there to film a short segment to go into an almost completed documentary on the Columbia River. It took less than a day with the town and the people to know that the magnitude of the story and the possible precedent-setting outcome merited a documentary of its own. What emerged was the KOMO TV Special Projects film, The River Takes a Town. This is Lee Miller, 70 years old and crippled. Mr. Miller is about to lose his $55 a month home. This is Fay Lauterbach. 3 years ago, she and her husband were forced to give up their dream home so that Bonneville Power could put towers on the property. Now widowed, Mrs. Lauterbach is about to lose a second home. They both live here, North Bonneville, Washington. Located by the dam that shares its name, North Bonneville is about to be inundated by the river that gives it life. A town of little apparent charm, North Bonneville has been in economic and psychological limbo for 3 years. Paint is peeling, roofs and exteriors deteriorating. The single theater stands empty. Grass grows untrimmed at the bases of the hand-painted street signs. There are more taverns here than churches. The post office, in lieu of a newspaper, is the information center. And on any given day, you can find gossip being exchanged in the local cafe. The people here are merchants, loggers, and construction workers. This is their story, and what happens when the river takes a town. For years, the people of North Bonneville have known a second powerhouse at Bonneville Dam could mean engulfment of their community. Authorized by Congress since 1937, the second powerhouse loomed in the wings until 1971. Then the decision came from the Army Corps of Engineers. The powerhouse would be on the Washington shore, and North Bonneville would have to go. At least the long uncertainty was over. The inevitable had happened, and residents courageously began planning the relocation of their shattered town, a task that would bring new woes, powerful opposition, and unforeseen trauma. Knowing they were ill-qualified to come head-to-head with the Army Corps of Engineers, town leaders recruited people knowledgeable in community planning and political string-pulling to pump up their ranks. Determined to create the new town on their own terms, North Bonneville prepared to launch a show of strength that is probably unprecedented by a town of similar size. Pollard Dixon is one of the professionals who is working for the town, a bright, aggressive community planner. Mr. Dixon recounts some of the early problems between the town and the Corps.
I think initially it should be brought back to 1971 when the Army Corps of Engineers announced that the Washington shore would be the location of the new second powerhouse at Bonneville Dam, and that location required the entire relocation or dispersion of the town of North Bonneville. The Army Corps of Engineers at that time told the townspeople and the town officials that they had the responsibility for doing the planning for the new town, for selecting a site and developing the finances and the resources to acquire the new town site. The efforts on the part of the town, particularly a town with 500 people that don't have the money to engage in a planning program to relocate an entire community, centered around where to get the resources. The Army Corps of Engineers made it clear that they wouldn't provide them, that they didn't have the authority to do it, and the town was obligated to fight for their own future.
Colonel Clarence Gilkey of the Corps of Engineers explains the Corps' position at that time.
This condition that Mr. Dixon is describing is a condition that existed back in late 1970 and 71 and through 1972 after the Corps had announced its plans for the construction of the second powerhouse. I have to interject here the fact that our activities are governed by specific authorities granted to us by the Congress. And at that time, we had no authority to reimburse the town or to pay for the town's planning for the relocation of the town of North Bonneville. However, we could, at that time, have prepared what we refer to as a feature design memo, which would have been an internal core document, which would have addressed the relocation of the town of North Bonneville.
From my personal observation, I think it's really pretty important to realize that through some administrative process, the Army Corps of Engineers felt that it could pay for a plan for relocating the town of North Bonneville if they did the plan under their own terms. But if the town wanted to do it and wanted to be directly involved in the relocation planning, the Corps couldn't pay for it. When you talk about the nuts,
Frustrated by legal vagaries, the town turned to Representative Mike McCormick for help. What emerged was a piece of legislation that would authorize the Corps to cooperate in the planning of the new town, but did not bind the Corps to contribute financial and technical assistance. Nor did it indicate clearly how much of the town was to be relocated. Unhappy about the pro-Corps tone of the bill, North Bonneville leaders felt they'd been let down. I asked Congressman McCormick if he sympathizes with the people of North Bonneville.
Well, to a reasonable extent, I certainly want the best for them in every way. There's a limit to how far the federal government will ever go in giving individual citizens everything they want, and I'm sure that certainly the citizens of North Bonneville recognize that there's a limit someplace, and that, although I haven't been deeply enough involved in the details of the current negotiations between the community and the Corps to know exactly what the issues may be, I'm sure everyone realizes that there has to be a limit. Obviously, it would be great if we could build a new North Bonneville with all facilities provided and be a new model town.
At the place that they wanted.
At the place that they wanted. But we're not operating in a vacuum. There are engineering limitations and cost limitations and legal limitations on the Corps, and so we have to work out the best situation we can.
Undaunted by bureaucratic meanderings, one thing is clear to townspeople. North Bonneville, however inelegant, is their home. If the government wants to take that home, then they should replace it with one that's agreeable to the folks who have to move there. Pollard Dixon characterizes the plain and simple philosophy of the people in North Bonneville.
a gutty people, people that have calluses on their hands, that are loggers and fishermen and people that worked on the tugs and the river, and their politics is based on brooms and shovels, if you will. They call the shots as they see them. And they see one thing: the federal government is going to take their town, and they're not going to be told what their new town is going to be if they're going to have a new one by the federal government. There's going to be their town.
You know, when you were our age, and they come and yank the rug out from under you, and this is exactly what they're doing. You have a business. It's not too big a business, but it's paid for, and your home isn't too big or too good, but it's paid for, and you get this age. And then they come along and say they're going to take your town out from under you.
Scares hell.
And they want, yes, it does. And it makes you darn mad, because they can't give you an answer at all. You ask a question, they won't give you an answer, not a bit. They can take money and they can send a man to the moon. They can put a car up there, but they don't want to move the railroad tracks. They don't want us to have another town. They want us to make a park. We don't need another park in Skamania County that bad. We need a new town. And it is scary when you get this age, and you're not going to lose everything, but you're going to give up your identity. This is what they want you to do. We're not going to give up our identity. In no way.
I'll tell you what, we drove.
14% of the residents of North Bonneville are retired, many of them on a subsistence level. Lee Miller has lived in the Columbia River Gorge for 60 years. Together with his 2 small dogs, Mr. Miller faces an uncertain future.
What they're going to want to do to me is shove me into an old folks' home, and I am not about to go. I've been independent all my life, and I'm going to stay that way till the good Lord comes after me. And it's just no way. But there is a lot of people in this town in the same fix that I'm in, old people, that they're going to want to shove out. And I want to relocate in the new town. I feel personally that they're just trying to cheat us out of it. They're actually trying to cheat us out of it. The engineers have no respect for the common people because they're government, and the government does not respect its people. We found that out during this administration. So now they're trying to deal us so we won't have a town site. That is, they say we will, but they're buying out one at a time, scattering the people right here in North Bonneville right now. And if they can thin them down enough, then there won't be enough to support a town. Therefore, they'll get by without. Now, if Uncle Sam, and damn it, I am that, can give Israel or Egypt $150 million just to kiss where they sat for accommodations, he can damn sure come here at home and build a small town for the people of North Bonneville.
The biggest fear residents have is that the Corps, working independently, will succeed in buying out a large portion of the town. In doing so, many residents will disperse from the area, and the town's population will diminish in size. Then, when it comes time to relocate people, the Corps will only relocate those who are left. Already, the Corps has acquired much property at the east end of town. It's here that construction on the cofferdam will initiate the powerhouse project. Corps spokesmen claim that many townspeople have asked to be bought out early because of hardships. If this is true, nobody's talking about it, or nobody wants to publicly admit being out of step with the town's patriotism. Nobody blames their neighbor. The Corps is the heavy.
We feel like that they're trying to buy out and just kick the people out of Bonneville as fast as they can without relocating as much of the utilities and the new town site for the people. I think they're more interested in just getting the people out of the way rather than moving the people. They would rather just disperse the town, just get it out.
I'm continually impressed with the people's stamina to withstand the thing that's happening in this community. They are convinced that they can take on the Army Corps of Engineers. They've done it, and they're going to fight it right to the end. They're convinced that if they keep it up, they will have once and for all established the point that the Army Corps of Engineers is not untouchable, that they've got to address the people's lives that they're affecting.
We are concerned about people. We're very concerned about people. Let me give you a couple of examples. At one point, one of the state agencies wanted to close out the old people's home in North Bonneville on very short notice and move the people. It quickly got around town that we were behind this, since of course it was part of our acquisition plan to acquire the old folks' home. As soon as we found out about it, we got in touch with the state agency involved and got their action on this deferred, first of all, to provide the people more notice, and secondly, to ensure that the inhabitants of the home were in fact eligible for relocation assistance benefits from the federal government, which had the state moved them out at the time they originally wanted to, it would have been questionable whether these benefits would have been paid or not.
Under the Uniform Relocations Act of 1970, the Corps must ensure that prior to displacement, There's sufficient, decent, safe, and sanitary housing at rents within the financial means of the families and reasonably accessible to their places of employment. The town says that the Corps has not lived up to this obligation and, in fact, wanted to move people into interim government housing in Vancouver, 40 miles away. The Corps says they are living up to their responsibility.
Well, we have developed our plans for interim housing. We know what we'll do to provide interim housing. As of today, we've only received one request from the town for interim housing. This has been forwarded for approval as is required for interim housing cases. And assuming that it is approved by higher headquarters, we already have a location in mind for this individual, and as soon as we get approval, we'll move her into temporary housing.
A month later, and that individual had still not been notified of her interim housing. She must be out of her home by the 1st of October, but does not know where she will go. It's the waiting, the being kept in the dark that seems to eat away at the collective morale of the townspeople.
The real example we have of the trauma is something that our society doesn't have measuring sticks to measure. In the last 4 months, we've had 6 people in this community die of fatal heart attacks. The fact that they don't know where they're going to go and what they're going to do has an awful lot to do with it, in my opinion. But our society doesn't know how to measure those kinds of things, and particularly the Army Corps of Engineers. The problem is that it's just a matter of fact of life. They died, that's the end of the story for their individual lives, but not for this community. It's part of the continuing trauma.
Faye Lauterbach's husband died this spring. She believes the emotional strain of losing 2 homes to power projects was instrumental in her husband's early death. The story goes back to a house on the banks of the Columbia that was the Lauterbach's dream home.
We had lived there for almost 20 years when suddenly there were surveyors in our front yard one morning, and when I inquired, they said that they had were surveying for BPA, and as far as they knew, there was a tower to go right where our house was. And we'd spent 20 years developing this house and had it just to the point that we considered perfect. It was just the way we wanted it. And we were suspended in midair, practically, for 3 years while they were dickering on this, trying to get information. We were trying to get information from them as to what the plan was, what was the time schedule, what were they going to do. And it was very difficult to get any information. And all this while we were it was a very traumatic experience. Then we finally got the information. We were given a appraisal and given an offering on the place, which was, we considered about 1/3 the value. We turned it down, got an attorney, and later they came out with a BPA, sent out their own appraiser, and we find that some are very compassionate. Some people consider the feelings of the citizens that are being upset and the citizens that are being uprooted. And they're very compassionate. Others are ruthless. They couldn't, they don't have any feeling at all toward what's happening to the people. So we built this house, the house that we're living in presently. We moved in May of 1973. And it's as much as possible a duplicate of the house that we had in the other location. And then we got word this spring that this area was to be included as the spoils area for the new Corps of Engineers powerhouse, and that we would likely have to move again. Well, this was so upsetting and such a bad experience for my husband. It took his life. He couldn't stand the thoughts of having to make another move. he couldn't sleep, and he was just tense and upset all the time, and it finally just was too much for him.
Where do we stand now with the signing of the contract?
Having reached some major compromises with the Corps, town leaders have thus far been unable to get agreement for 100% replacement. And it seems unlikely they will outside a courtroom.
Chris, we're talking about a land area that possibly will be, maybe 360 acres, for an optimum town plan, as we call it. What we want for a document, a comprehensive plan for the town, is we want that entire 360 acres laid out so we know what land uses are going to be in what areas. And we're saying that within that comprehensive town plan, we want 100% of the existing facilities and capacities. Now, out of that optimum town plan, that may be, that much. We don't know, but it may be that much. So that's what we call 100%. And we expect the Corps to pay for that. We also expect the Corps to pay for the cost of developing this optimum town plan, the planning cost of it. Because there's no way that you can develop a new town by just doing a part of it. You have to do all of it.
Well, I think there are two issues involved, and this is the reason behind the traditional replacement only of a percentage factor. The first one being that if the projected development or the projected expansion of the town did not occur, the town would be confronted with facilities, streets, fronting on vacant lots, overcapacity water system, overcapacity sewer system, that would never be used. Now, the town would be confronted with the maintenance and the upkeep of these unused facilities. At the same time, the federal government would have put out federal funds for the construction of facilities that just wouldn't be used. The other issue involved here is that, again, traditionally, and I'm not addressing specifically North Bonneville now, the federal government has replaced or provided only the sufficient facilities for the people that actually relocate into the new town. It has an obligation to replace these facilities because it's moved these people out of where the facilities that they had before. But now assume a natural expansion of the town by people moving into the town in the future from other locations such as Vancouver or Portland, wherever. Why should the federal government carry the costs of the normal expansion of that town when under any other circumstances the town one way or another would have to finance its future expansion within its own capabilities?
While the Corps thinks the town is unreasonable in its demands, the town suspects the Corps of obstructionism.
Well, I think that we should really think about that possibility, that they're deliberately stalling, and then when the time runs to a certain point, they'll say, well, the town will not cooperate with us, so we're going to simply condemn the whole thing and take it over. Take over the planning and whatever goes with it. And you accept what we give you.
In all fairness, in looking at the position of the Army Corps of Engineers, their traditional approach and their obligation is to provide the means of using materials and machinery to construct a project, whether it be a powerhouse or a dam or whatever. The logistics of machinery and materials is their job. They know very little about the logistics of moving a human community. Our involvement with the people, the human matrix, if I can use that term, is what we're concerned about in relocating to the new town. But their provisions and their guidelines have no consideration for that element. And that's where the basic disagreement occurs in the planning process. If they are willing to integrate themselves into a planning program where they have to address the moving of a human matrix, a human community, if you will, along with the physical streets and buildings, I think we have grounds for real agreement.
Nobody knows right now how it will wind up. It seems certain that the replacement issue will be decided by a declaratory judgment in a courtroom. Appeals may come after that. The town has the hammer in a single respect. They've waited this long, and they can wait longer. The Corps is under congressional mandate to have power online by 1981. Something will have to give. Whatever the outcome, the River Project has and will continue to unalterably affect the lives of many.
If the Corps of Engineers took people's personal lives into this situation, I don't believe that they would have dragged the residents of North Bonneville through. How many years has it been? 3 years. And I think at the first meeting they said, well, it won't be within 6 months, and it will maybe even be a year. Well, here are these individuals in North Bonneville, during all of this time, have been in limbo. There's no way to know what's going to happen to their lives. They think they're settled for a lifetime, and their lives are simply uprooted, but not being transplanted. They're in a very precarious position. Some of it's more upsetting to some than it is to others, as it was to my husband. It was just more than he could stand.
So, like the ancient Indians whose graves were uncovered during the building of the Bonneville Dam and moved to this pioneer cemetery, the lives of North Bonneville have been rudely interrupted. Years after we're benefiting from the additional power from the second powerhouse project, the remnants of North Bonneville may still be struggling to put the pieces back together.
The River Takes a Town aired twice in Seattle and once in Portland on KOMO's sister station, KATU-TV. Almost 4 months after the initial Seattle broadcast, the town of North Bonneville won its desperate battle for survival, and on November 19th, signed a contract providing for all the planning and designing necessary to relocate North Bonneville as an optimum new town. Shortly after the signing of the contract, KOMO received a letter from North Bonneville Planning Director Pollard Dixon. It reads in part, "The importance of River Takes a Town cannot be limited to an assessment of its contribution, either through timing or content, to the survival of North Bonneville. The documentary will play an important role in the changing of the Army Corps of Engineer regulations to ensure that the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970 will never again be used as license to circumvent local governmental officials in a deliberate effort to disperse a community of human beings." He goes on to say, "By turning your camera on old buildings that are second class, you insulted North Bonneville and reinforced their will to survive. By talking to its people and capturing its sound, you exposed its cries. By telling its story, you caused them to look at themselves. You told them and others that they are first class. They now believe it and will without question live in the future with a personal dignity that they so richly deserve."